go ahead and just put into the side chat where you're from. So just as a warm up. Welcome. Please enter into the side chat where you're dialing in from. Hey, and maybe you even want to put what the temperature is. Hi, Karen. Welcome. Warren, thank you. Welcome. Andrea. Our Toronto members, our Toronto and our New York members, New Jersey are showing up strong. Welcome, welcome. We'll be recording this as well for other individuals. 81 Fahrenheit. Wow, it is warm.
We can tell the Fahrenheit people are from the US.
That's right. We're still we're in the
somebody
British
converted
system.
23.75. Wow, that's so 80, it's about 25. That's comfortable actually.
Yeah. Welcome. Cater's on another call. And feel free to put yourself on video or not. Again, it's completely up to you. All right. Well, we're at 12:03. And if you're okay with it, Cecilia, I think we can just go ahead and start.
Sure, we can start with the intro and then people will
ready to eat,
trickle in.
Yeah, Warren, we are ready to eat, but if you could put yourself on mute, that would be amazing.
Did he say ready to eat?
Yeah, I think so. It's making me hungry.
I think you meant it's actually lunchtime right now.
Yeah, I should have taken a bite before coming up as well.
Welcome everyone to our, well, what it was called originally a roundtable, but it's really more of a discussion. We are going to facilitate your questions and your comments and thoughts towards the end of the session. So what we're going to ask is, please take your questions and you can put them either into the side chat or you can save them until the last 10 minutes of the call and then put them into the side chat or raise your hand. At any point in time, if you would like to take a question, you can throw it in the side chat. We will typically be answering them at the end, unless it's something that you would like for a clarification, that you can't see something or you're having some sort of technical difficulty. You could actually just message Ben Hum, who's on the screen, our president, and then he can potentially assist you with that. All right. Then I'm going to move into our agenda. So basically, we're going to start out with some introductions. I'm actually going to move the announcements to the end, but we're going to start out with our introductions so we can meet Cecilia and myself, and then we'll have our discussion, which will take about 40 to 45 minutes. And we definitely want to leave some time for some of your questions. But we have a lot of amazing content here, so the time is sure to fly by very quickly. So I'll just start out with myself. My name is Juliette Turpin. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the Director of Membership for the Toronto chapter of NAP. And I am very lucky today to have the opportunity to facilitate this conversation with Cecilia. And she's basically a consultant with 35 years of experience, cross-cultural around the world, that she's going to be sharing with us. She is currently the head of her organization, which is called Lumina Learning. And then I'm going to allow herself to add on to that right now. Welcome, Cecilia, to the stage.
Well, thank you, Ben and Juliette and Mike as well. for this opportunity to share my experience from my 30 plus years of, Canadian and Asia Pacific experience. And it's an honor for me to be doing this with, collaborating with NAP, which I've learned about, several years ago through Ben. And I think today's topic is very timely, especially in the environment that we're in post-pandemic. And I think it brings me great pleasure to be able to, I returned to Canada, Toronto, during the pandemic about a year and a half ago. So when I arrived, I had an opportunity to gauge our current atmosphere. And I think it's very, very timely for me to apply what I've learned in the past 20 years in Asia, but in a slightly different way, because diversity and inclusion is different in every continent. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And maybe we can just dive right in, and I can ask you to tell us a little bit about your journey and how you actually ended up in this work of intercultural communications.
Sure. So the family, like many Asians here in Canada, were immigrants, and my family came in the 70s, and I did all my schooling in the Atlantic coast. So after university, I did, and you'll be shocked to learn what I went to university for. I didn't know. Well, I didn't know what I wanted. I wanted to be a secretary, always wanted to be a secretary, but that was a college thing. But I wanted to go to university. So I gave up my first love and then just went for business administration. And then 2 years later, I wasn't enjoying what I wanted. And the university had a new program, secretarial science. So without a doubt, I jumped, and I didn't look back for another 18 years. And after graduation, I moved to Alberta, and 5 years in Edmonton, 12 years in Calgary. And then I relocated to Hong Kong, where I was originally from. And I took a year out before moving back, because I did, midlife hit me, and I did some skills inventory, and I realized that I wanted to pursue communication. So I left with the intention to pursue a second career in communications, but at the same time wanted to reconnect with my own culture. So that's a back end of it. And over time, as I learned more about my own culture, I then began to understand more about my people, and then my family, and of course, myself. And the more I discovered, the more it helped me to actually spot some of the nuance in workplaces that it's very much cultural related. Hong Kong is very multicultural, like it's a melting pot of cultures where, you'd be surprised to know that the top passport holders are French, and Canada is up there. And any typical workplace, if it's a multinational, you're bound to find very multicultural teams. And a lot of times people don't realize that there's so much diversity in the room. And human nature is that we use ourselves as a yardstick against other people. So why aren't people thinking like us? Why aren't they doing doing this the same way that I'm doing it? So that often gets in the way, and that's where a lot of the workplace misunderstandings and conflict arise. So I think I didn't set out to do what I am doing in the cross-cultural space. It just evolved over time, because communications, I worked for companies, and then at some point I reached, in a place where in my career where I've always, have a love for sharing my knowledge. So I think the natural space to go into would be learning and development, where I could go in and train people, pass on my experience and my knowledge in a way where, people can learn from me in a way where their paths could be a lot shorter with less challenges because of the things I've imparted on them. Whether it's insights or experience or wisdom. So there you go. It just very naturally, I kind of evolved, and communication and the cross-cultural element, it's such a natural one to combine.
Yeah, almost like it was fate, a calling, if you will.
But I think you have to recognize it though,
Right.
because otherwise you won't be able to kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you're saying about the how we use ourselves as a yardstick. One of my favorite quotes, which I put in the side chat, is by Anais Nin, which basically she talks about how we see people not as they are, but as we are. So yeah, definitely, I hear what you're saying there. There's a lot of, when people see the words intercultural communication, there sometimes is confusion between intercultural communication and emotional intelligence. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the nuanced differences between the two?
EQ is definitely very valuable. Whether it doesn't matter what rank you're on, how low or how senior, how junior or how senior, because it helps us to understand first our own emotions, to be able to identify those same ones in other people. And, it takes experience and it takes time for us to develop EQ. Intercultural competence is so much more than just EQ. Definitely, you need the cultural sensitivity, and that's part of EQ, right? And to be able to understand the nuance, but first, you got to understand your own. What do you bring to the table? Because we all bring our own cultural conditioning, whether it's Asian or Indian, or it doesn't matter, because we each of us has our own upbringing, and whether it's culturally influenced, or the family, or society, or the industry that you're in, because a government employee who's worked for 30 years definitely has a unique way of doing things and thinking, and someone who's from nonprofit or startup or banking, like every industry and profession has their own unique way of school of training, so to speak. So I think there is a slide that I have prepared where intercultural competence isn't just about skills. It's so much more. It's showing up with some of our important attributes, like practicing patience, showing our curiosity, rather than with our assumptions in our communications. We practice learning to ask questions for the other person to share with us what we think we know. So it's you can say EQ, it's one component, but intercultural competence encompasses so much more.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. And yes, you did prepare a slide. We'll be sure to grab that for the end. And then in the work that you do, can you tell us a little bit about why it is so important for organizations to be considering intercultural communication within the work that you do, what you've seen and heard?
Again, I think that communication is just one component that, it's part of the skills. It's important because if you look at whether it's pre-pandemic or post-pandemic, whether you work for a local company or you work for a multinational, the place we have arrived in, and especially post-pandemic, we have virtual, we have remote, we have hybrid. And a lot of times you may not even know who you're dealing with, whether it's on the phone or email or virtually. So, and we're not just our ethnicity, we are so much more. Each person's identity is very multi-layered, right? You've got that slide right there. So whether I mentioned a little earlier, your background, your professional background, the school of training, everything is a part of our cultural DNA, and we're all different, right? I come from a family of 5, and all kids are different. That stems from where we went to school, who our social network is, the information that we digest from media to books to the people you talk to every day. We're sponges. We just soak up other people's, sometimes their values, their beliefs, and then we have our own. So that's why, to develop our intercultural competencies, it's not just a webinar you attend, or it's a podcast that you listen to. It's an ongoing process, much like communication. It's an ongoing process, because every person you deal with, whether it's in society or at workplace, it's different, and our style ought to be adapted across situations and personalities. And sometimes personality is a bigger monster than culture.
Yes. And so given that's the case, what do you think would be some of the more common challenges that you see for organizations to consider and to take into account intercultural communications and the importance of it?
I think as professionals or individuals, we have to start with ourselves. Even without putting the intercultural element on communications, it's already complex. Like how often do we have conflicts and misunderstandings, even just within our own family or our own home with the people that we know? So if you enter into a workplace with such a diverse team, or often diverse, you have different departments. So finance department operate differently from IT or from HR. We all think very differently, right? And I think the thing to start with is with ourselves. Learn how to communicate in a way where catch ourselves on the internal biases, on assumptions. We all have those, right? And I'm not excluded, and at some point I had to start working on them, because they just get in your way. When you start to pay attention how other people respond or react to you, they either take offense to what you say, and I'm not saying that it's always our fault, like takes 2 to tango. You pay attention to how other people respond to you. If you're not welcoming, people will walk away. And if you are, in a position where you are, where you're able to cultivate a culture, whether it's a negative culture or a positive culture, I think your awareness, you need to also work on your awareness, because you can't change what you're not aware of. So there are different elements in there. And, for companies, I think, they can certainly consider training or professional development. But I would say often the challenge would be not doing things in an integrative way, but a very fragmented, leadership training is in style, let's do that. D&I training is in style, let's do that. And, to think that like an hour of a webinar would do it, like it's probably needs some rethinking.
So not looking at it from a holistic perspective, but more in bits and pieces. Yeah, I see that in my work as well. I think that based on, I'd love for you to share your story, and how you came to know that you needed to make some changes in your intercultural communication. You had shared with me in our earlier conversation a little bit about how you came to that awareness. I would love if you could share that.
I've always been big on personal development
Mm-hmm.
because that's something that you can't do it at the mercy of your company. If there's benefits
Mm-hmm.
or if there's, provision for you to go upgrade yourself. So I've always had that in the background. And so you just, after I relocate overseas in 2001, even though it was my own culture that I returned to because I grew up in the West. And so, and there are many either Canadian born or American born or immigrants in the room here that you may resonate that even though your generation was born here,
Mm-hmm.
your family could be immigrants. And
Mm-hmm.
when you by day you interact with Canadians or American in Western society with Western values, you go home and you return to a different set of values. So
Mm-hmm.
as I relocated, I also had to do some adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
And by nature, I'm quite introverted. And so I enjoy observing,
Mm-hmm.
listen more than I talk in my younger years. So that was very helpful for me to kind of sense the room. And I think coming back to your point, intercultural competence, that is something important that you, if in doubt, listen more than you talk. Over the years, I also met many Asian returnees from, whether it's North America or Europe. And Western societies advocate that we be expressive and we be outspoken and we be just self-focused, you first. But, as Western as it may be in Hong Kong, there's still a lot of Asian values rooted in across society and across even a multinational company, because the national workforce dominates your corporate culture. And so when you start to pay attention, again, coming back to the point, how other people respond or react to you, whether they tickle fence, and again, learn to read facial expression, nonverbal cues, those are all important over time. And I think when you talk about communications, it's all about results and outcome. Does your message get you the outcome that you want? If it doesn't, and you feel that you're constantly not being heard, then you have to come back to yourself. What did I do wrong? So the reflection piece is important as well, and forever developing your awareness.
Yeah, definitely. And if I am someone who identifies that there are things that I would need to change to improve my intercultural competence, how would one go about tackling that and saying, okay, I want to improve this?
Going back a little bit, how do you notice that you need to,
Mm-hmm.
it's by the relationship at work, of course. If people gravitate towards you or they're walking away.
Mm-hmm.
I can give a very simple example, multinational law firm. So, legal profession, that industry has its own characteristics and, hierarchy. A junior British lawyer working under an Asian female partner. So there's already a lot of layers in there. Again, I mentioned the typical direct, bold type of communication does not fly with someone from a culture where I'm the superior. You're not respecting me by being so out there with your comments. You know, Asian cultures are very sensitive towards feedback, whether it's constructive or not, because it any way you package it, it will come across as criticism. So I think those are the nuance, the knowledge, cultural knowledge that you need to, at the very minimum, understand some about the culture that you're dealing with. You brought on the screen a slide about communication across cultures. So this is just one slide that I pulled from some training content that I have. Now you can find yourself in that chart. You might be from one place, but you also have to ask yourself, what is your style similar to? For me, obviously I grew up in the West, so and I prefer to be direct because then it leaves no room for misunderstanding. That's my preference in communication. You know, if direct doesn't mean blunt, or it doesn't mean being rude. Of course, you know, it's part of communication. You just have to learn to, to communicate with the best intent. And I think our intention in our communication is also key for you to pay attention to. Are you communicating to connect with somebody? You want to build this relationship, or you communicating because you're up here and you want to exert yourself with power, or you're speaking, from a place where you want to show that you're smarter than somebody. So checking in with yourself, with your intention, to make sure that they're in the right place. And then understanding if you're from a high context or low context culture, and your communication styles, and also preference.
So
I hope I
like,
answer your question.
No, you did. I think what you're the part that I'm going to take away, because there's so much there to unpack, is that we have to do some of our own homework, and we have to learn how to read the room and then just take a pause on that, which I love. I think that the intention piece is also another piece that I'll take away from what you just said. A lot of times, when we're in a situation, we'll see that we're getting a different result than we expect. And we then need to question ourselves as to what our original intention is. So, an example for me that hits home is when I'm talking about to my son and asking him to do something, and we end up shouting. And at the end of it, the question is, did I want to win an argument? Did I want to make him feel bad? Or what was I really trying to do? And at the end, I was really just trying to get him to do something, but my intention got totally waylaid by my own emotion.
Yeah, for sure, because that right and wrong piece, it's a huge one for, many people, just because, there's already that relationship dynamic. You're as a parent, which I am as well, you want to be respected, right? But then I think, and I'm a cross-cultural parenting is also one of my, passionate topic, because and NAP as well, because we've got generations involved in there. We also have gender sometimes, whether it's same-sex parent or different, and then you have that power dynamic, right? So yeah, there's a lot of things to unpack. And for me as a parent, I put that relationship ahead of everything. Right and wrong damages all relationships, whether it's in the workplace or anywhere. So I constantly remind myself, okay, the outcome of this is to take our relationship a little further rather than continue to put dents in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Intention is key. So if we're an individual who's working in a company and we notice that there are definitely there's a need for some intercultural communications training, emphasis put on intercultural communication. What can I as an individual do to basically present this or the business case to my organization for the benefits of intercultural communication and competence?
Well, I think you have to, to get management, senior management buy-in, you have to present a case where, okay, this is what's happening. And this is what I think, how we can benefit. Right? You have to present, okay, there are issues here, there are challenges, you have to highlight those. And then here's what I think we can do to make a difference. And I understand, training or any kind of initiatives with corporates is very budget related. So you have to probably have a strong business case. And if the current situation is negatively impacting, whether it's team morale or client relation, or because, one of the important element that why would intercultural competence benefit organizations is if you claim to be an international brand, then you also have to ask yourself, are your employees, do they have that intercultural, do they reflect that they are open-minded, they are inclusive, and they are culturally sensitive? I think you have to, not just overuse the terms inclusivity or belongingness, but actually break it down, unpack what that looks like. Because I think a lot of companies or individuals, especially these days, you repeatedly you hear so much D&I inclusion, but what does it look like? Are you actually embodying those elements? You say that you're inclusive, but you blatantly overlook or dismiss somebody with what you just rudely said. So those already don't align.
Absolutely. And I know that, in the work that I do, I definitely would amplify your message about getting the stakeholders on board. And just as a little tip for everyone here, with the stakeholders, it often the best way to go, and especially within for-profit organizations, is to come from an evidence-based approach. So that evidence typically within organizations can come from your employee resource groups, it can come from your employee voice data. If you're lucky enough to have data on the demographics within your organization, you can bring those forward. And then of course, there's always the general data that's available in the marketplace. Tons of data that talks about the business case for diversity and inclusion and intercultural competence and communication. In fact, Randstad actually just put out, which is my day job, is the organization I work with, put out a work monitor report that surveyed over 5,000 individuals across the world. And the feedback that we received is that 75% of millennials will not join a company unless they know that an organization is working on their intercultural competence, as well as their diversity and inclusion initiatives. So definitely amplifies your message, Cecilia.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So that being said, I mean, if a company is aware that, yes, this is important, and yes, we need to get started on it, what are some of the potential challenges that you've seen for taking on this endeavor?
Well, we talked about budget, right? And
Yeah.
that's unfortunately a lot of time professional development initiatives, training, that all is budget contingent on budget. Depending on the industry, like if you're in retail and you start getting customer complaints, that would be a really, really good one to, I'm a customer as well. I'm a consumer, and I've
Agreed.
done my fair bit of complaints sometimes. There's a lot of room for customer service, I think, in Canada for sure. Depending on your brand, I would imagine any very established brands, and there are companies that are 40, 50, 100, 150 years, and sometimes senior management remain the same. Those might be the ones, because it's often, getting people's buy-in requires that, okay, what's in it for me? Right? So from management all the way down to junior staff, because changes can be challenging. Depends on the the dynamics, the makeup of the company.
Yep, definitely. So speaking the language of the individuals that are sitting in front of you and giving them, as you said, what's in it for me, what's in it for them to move forward, I think is really important in any setting.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about, with all of the different lenses that you have, having worked in Asia, having worked in Europe, working in North America, are there any differences that you see in regards to the way that we approach intercultural competence?
I can't speak on others' behalf, but intercultural competence in some countries comes under diversity and inclusion, but it's so much more. I mean, in the North American landscape, it's more focused on cultures, especially since the pandemic. We have BLM, anti-Asian, indigenous. In the US, it could be, something else. In Hong Kong at the moment, because of the cultural, the complexity, LGBT, it's something that's actively, they're working on. Disability is another one. So it really, really depends. Europe is more matured with its intercultural studies. They have programs in university, and they have a lot of certification. But again, it could be done differently, because Europe, when they talk about intercultural competence, they could be just, because if you look at Europe, it's many, many countries together.
Yes.
So it could be just within Europe that they could be dealing with. For me, whenever I'm requested to do a training, it's not just about focus on one specific culture, even though, yes, I've done it for Western companies who is doing business with China. And I have a training coming up where I have North American, so Canada, US, and then a few Latin American countries wanting to learn more about how to work with their mainland Chinese counterparts. So there are different ones, definitely a mix of high and low, cultures. But I think for me, the message that I want to bring out is, no matter where you are, the outcome is so that you have the awareness and the skill sets to interact with anybody.
Right.
Because a lot of time we have, you walk into a room full of strangers, you don't know who's there. You're not going to have time to do any research before you enter into a room, or you just, your first day at a new job, you're not going to have a sheet on everybody that you work with to understand. And understanding your teammates or whoever takes time, right? And it takes, are you genuine? Are you sincere in wanting to understand this person to make a fruitful connection, or are you just care about to, get the work done and then leave it at that? So it really depends on coming back to, the whole point of intercultural competence is to develop your skill set so that it encompasses not just your skills, but your knowledge and your attitude, your awareness, which is a big piece. And so that you will communicate in a way that build relationship rather than offend people. Because I feel that, I've been back from Asia for about a year and a half, and I get a sense that questions that nobody is sensitive towards, hey, where are you from? It's actually a very sensitive question in North America.
Oh, interesting.
I think there's two sides of the coin. You have to ask yourself, is the other person asking what kind of tone and what kind of delivery they're asking? That pertains to normal communication anyway, right? So it's not what you say, it's how you say something, right? So, and if you're offended by something, you also need to check in with yourself. Why did I get offended? You have to go home after and reflect on that. Was it my insecurity, or the other person is just obviously rude? Yeah, so I mean, in Hong Kong, we walk into a room full of foreigners and strangers and local people. The first question we ask is, hey, where are you from? Because we're genuinely interested in knowing, where have you lived? Where have you worked? And that is just to kind of set a tone to, who am I talking to? I asked you that question when we had the chat because I'm interested. And also it gives me a little idea as to the cultural background of this person. And, if anybody asks me, hey, where you from? Born in Hong Kong, grew up in Canada. That's as clear as ABC. So there's no guessing, there's no assumptions. I've had people walk up to me and say, hey, you must be from Shanghai. And I had to correct them. Now, in this day and age, those kinds of assumptions, it's dangerous, right? So you have to reflect on, was it you or was it the other person? So,
yeah, I love what you're saying there, especially, I mean, that's another opportunity, I would guess, to check in with the intention of the other individual as well as yourself for that conversation.
Yeah, and conversations don't have to always end up in heat. Even if you get someone and you don't know what you don't know, you're not aware of what you're not aware. And a lot of people out there, they're not aware that I didn't realize that I offended you. I didn't realize I was carrying a strong tone. So there are ways that you can kind of politely steer that conversation so that it doesn't end up in heat or an argument, right? So at the end of the day, you don't want to be in that kind of energy all day long.
Yes. There's so much content here and we're coming to the end, but I definitely, there's two questions that I want to get out there just to make sure that everyone has some takeaways. And one of them is how could we as individuals market our intercultural competence? How could we display that to the world to make us either more promotable, marketable? What are your suggestions there?
I think it starts with being open, being open-minded towards people, situations, circumstances, because it's very easy for people to take note of your thought process just from one conversation, whether it's on a situation or on public affairs or on current affairs. It's very easy. So if you're interviewing for a job, that's also very easy for the interviewer to pick up on whether you have that broad-mindedness or world view. it's very easy. And so, for companies who want to recruit, making sure that the people that they hire is culturally competent or open-minded, because you don't want to, the most expensive or the most effective place during that recruitment exercise is right at the beginning.
Yes.
Right, your hiring and your selection. So I think, companies can use an assessment tool, a skillfully designed assessment tool, and then adding on that would be the way you design your interview questions.
Mm-hmm. Great. So if we were to summarize for everyone what the components of intercultural competence might be, how would you kind of just summarize that for everyone?
So I had a slide, so I think it would be good to share that with everybody. I mentioned earlier, it's not just one webinar or a podcast. It encompasses a lot of elements. So maybe that one slide would be good for people either to take a snapshot or to understand what. Oops, some information shifted.
Yeah, it looks like it got
It's
a little
okay.
bit. Yeah.
It's still readable. So you start with some basic knowledge, right? About if you're working, if your position requires that you work with a culture all the time, whether it's Japan or, Italians or what have you, try and understand a little bit, basic facts. Don't launch in there assuming, and again, the ethnocentrism, thinking that our culture that we grew up being familiar with is what everybody ought to. So that's a dangerous assumption again. So you've got the facts and knowledge, and then your skills, which is anywhere from your communication to your relationship to learning how to collaborate on teams, and then your attributes. It's a long list, because if you have the book knowledge, you have good skills, but if you don't practice, being kind and considerate and have the patience to listen to somebody when they talk rather than interrupting, or the humility part, the especially if you're a leader, and then your attitudes and your awareness, those are important pieces as well. Because if you allow these internal noises, whether it's your internal unconscious biases or your assumptions about a certain culture, then they do get in your way. So I would say this is one slide that if you hear nothing else today, it's probably a good takeaway. Oh, you're on mute, Juliet.
Facts and knowledge, skills, attributes, attitude, and awareness. Yeah. Wonderful. Great summary. Thank you very much. I think that I'm going to open up for questions in a moment. Is there anything that you wanted to make sure that we got across that we didn't get to cover, Cecilia?
I think we covered many of it. Okay. I mean, and a good reminder again, this is part of our personal development, because at the end of the day, you want to, whether your aspiration is to remain in North America domestically with your career, or it's international, everywhere you go, things have arrived in a time in history where we're just surrounded by diversity. I think that piece not going anywhere, but the inclusion piece and also the belonging piece, making other people feel welcome as you would like to be treated, it's important. So that piece would help you develop your EQ and also your awareness, and the inclusion piece. making sure that you actually understand what inclusion looks like, and not just wear that, every day and as a label. Because at the end of the day, leadership is about walking the talk and embodying, the key elements. How do you want to be perceived? But also understanding who you are, and not just wearing, learning a leadership model. So understanding who you are, and develop your own character and understand yourself, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so our own intention is important there as well.
Yeah,
Thank
for sure.
you very much. So much information there. And we do have one question here, which we have time for. And it says here, how can you measure and develop intercultural competence for individuals, teams, and or organization wide?
As a leader, I mean, their intercultural awareness is important, because they're leading a team. So that person, whether it's a project team, or whether it's a CEO, their ability to sense what that company, what that team, whether it's a group of people who can work together collaboratively, or they're just in silos, like that would be, again, comes back to your EQ part. Are you able to pick up on those nuances? I would say the measuring it's more qualitative than quantitative. Using your sense. Are people getting along? Are people building connection, or are they, they just want to be in their own bubble, doing their own work, pumping out outcomes? Again, I would say, it starts with the individual, and then you, of course, training up the team, how to work collaboratively, how to understand the makeup of that team. Because what each person brings to the table can either build or break. So understand your teammates, as a leader, understand their personality and how to leverage on people's strengths and how to put them together. Like, if somebody is good at something, how to complement that strength with somebody with another person that, with a different strength, so that they can maximize their performance. I'd say start at individual and then build up to team, and then, because you can't have the organizational stuff in place, but everybody, it's not, they don't do their stuff. So it's perhaps several things together alongside each other.
And Timothy's offering up some additional assessment tools. And I also do, besides the qualitative can also often be quantified in employee voice data, performance reviews are another good way. But we have found that employee voice data can be exceptional at being able to move your stakeholders. So yeah, definitely appreciate that.
Employee surveys, like those sort of tools. And I've heard about IDI and CQ.
Yes.
Timothy shared. Again, depending on the size of your employees, you can use a combination of tools. Sometimes sorry, I'm trying to read Timothy's message here. What can we find? I've heard about IDI and CQ. Now, your question, Timothy, on familiarity, have I used these tools? No, I haven't. Because very often when companies come to me and they are already at the point where we want this training and this is the situation. Of course, I will have, if I have the accessibility of decision makers and HR, I would get I would get a sense of what is the situation here? Why are you asking for this type of training? And that would be my needs analysis. And then we will go from there. The upcoming training that I have with this multinational, I fortunately had, I was able to tweak the questionnaire that they're going to share with the participants. So the information that's going to come back to me before the training, I'll be able to extract some very qualitative, like, what are your current challenges? And, what is your, what would you like to learn in this specific training? So those I often make sure that I meet the participants' needs by addressing what they share with me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Cecilia. There was a lot there that we're going to take away with us, a lot of nuggets, and then also you were kind enough to give us the summary, and then we'll make sure that we give everyone your contact information so that they can get in touch with you. And I know that in addition to your business, you also teach some courses at, is it university? Which university was it?
McMaster.
McMaster.
So through their continuing education, their recently launched Intercultural Competency program, I started teaching in June, and I'm,
Perfect.
I'm in, like, it's a hour and a half every week for 9 weeks.
Okay.
And it comes in different modules. I'll be teaching the communication one in the fall. Right now it's intercultural workplace. So we talked a lot about structure and culture, organization, and challenges, and yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We are
You're
grateful
welcome. My
to have
pleasure.
had the opportunity to learn from you.
Yeah.
I'm going to move into our announcements in our last few minutes. I want to just give you a few heads up and nuggets, but actually, I'm going to have Ben do it, because Ben, our president for NAP Toronto, is here, and he would be the best person to be able to give us these announcements. So Ben, go ahead.
Thank you, Cecilia and Juliet, for such an enriching afternoon on a Thursday. And we're excited to announce some upcoming initiatives and events for NAP. And it really builds on the conversation that we've had this afternoon, especially with NAP Toronto launching a brand new career center in collaboration with Pixi, which is based in New York, actually. And this new platform does exactly what we just talked about this afternoon, where it highlights soft skills and cultural values onto an innovative talent connecting platform that brings together Asian talent with also employers. So check that out on our website, which is naptoronto.org. And the final thing is certainly to remind folks that one of our highlight flagship events for NAP, for all our chapters, is coming up in Washington, D.C. next month, August 11th to the 13th, with the first segment being an ERG Summit, which is going to be day one on Thursday, August 11th. And certainly if you and your ERG members and D&I leaders have a chance to attend, we would love to have you join us. The ERG Summit session will include workshops on best practices for running an ERG, measuring ERG success, and what it takes to build an ERG for the future of work. And we'd love to see everyone in Washington, D.C. And if we don't see you there, we're really delighted to have everyone join us this afternoon. And I'm going to pass it back to Juliet to close off the session this afternoon.
Thank you very much, everyone. Cecilia has been kind enough to put in the contact information, so feel free to reach out there. I can also be found on LinkedIn, as well as Ben. Thank you for your participation. The recordings will be there available for our ERG members, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you again, for the NAP team, Juliet, Ben, and Mike, for this great pleasure to share my experience with everybody in the room today. And for anybody who's going to be listening to the recording, feel free to reach out if you have any questions or wish to learn more about intercultural communications or competencies in general. Thank you.
Thank you